Hey, what's up everybody? It's Coach Matt over here, Primal Athlete Training Center, www.primalatc.com. You know guys, we always say this time of year being track season, we get about 100 to 150 emails, actually depending on the day. As we get closer to the track meets at the end of the week, the emails slow down. But at practice, in the very beginning of the week, get a ton of questions. And what I've started to do is categorize these questions and see which types of questions are getting asked the most. And for some reason, the past couple weeks, I've been getting a lot of questions about using underweight and overweight throwing implements. I've gotten these questions before. I think I've actually done a video or two about overweight and underweight implements before. But, before it was, a high school guy throwing a 12-pound shot, and he says, I'm throwing 50 feet. I've been throwing for 3 years. I've been throwing for 4 years. I'm throwing 50 feet. Should I start using a 14-pound shot? Should I start using a 16-pound shot? Or a girl, kind of the same thing, high school girl. I've been throwing this is my last year of throwing. I'm a senior. I throw 40 feet in the shot put. Should I start using a 5K? Should I start using a 10-pound shot? What would you recommend for an overweight shot put? Well, now for some reason, I'm getting a lot of questions from younger athletes. I'm getting a lot of questions from athletes who are, 7th grade, 8th grade, freshmen in high school, coaches who are asking about their younger athletes, freshmen in high school, 8th grade, junior high school, things of that nature. And, we get a lot of questions about this. And they say, Coach, I'm starting out with a girl. She's brand new. She shows some real promise. I want to start using overweight implements. Or, I'm starting out with a guy. He did track in junior high school when he was 13, 14 years old. Now he's a freshman. Should I use a heavier shot put? And guys, what this all really boils down to is the fact that somewhere along the line in this country, somewhere along the line, track and field became sort of this idea of, well, what we'll do is we'll overload you with weight. And what you normally use in competition will feel easier. They overweight shot puts, stuff that you do in the weight room. Oh, okay, you have trouble squatting? Well, let's throw a lot of weight on there, and that'll help you get down to parallel. Oh, you have trouble throwing a shot put this certain distance? Let's give you a heavier shot put. It's going to make the lighter one feel easier. And, that makes sense in a little ways. You can say something like, oh, well, they'll get stronger if they're going to use the heavier implement. The regular implement's going to feel lighter in their hands. It's not going to feel like it weighs as much. Well, what you guys have to realize is that track and field, especially the throwing events, is a form-based event. And I say it all the time. Your form, your technique, that's going to be about 75% of your makeup as a thrower is going to be your form and your technique. The other 25% of who you are, of what makes you a thrower, is going to be your strength, your agility, your balance, your coordination, your speed, your rhythm, your timing. All that stuff is going to fit into that other 25% of who you are. So the form and technique is paramount. The form and technique is what needs to be focused on. So by putting a heavier shot put or a heavier discus or using a heavier hammer or an overweight javelin training ball, javelin training device, and putting that in your arm, it is probably for a younger athlete going to throw off a lot of their form and a lot of their technique because it's going to throw off their timing, it's going to throw off their release angle, it's going to mess up their speed through the circle and their footwork in the circle. And while it will get their arm a little bit stronger, it's certainly not going to help any of the other stuff that's associated with training and with coaching a younger athlete who's just learning the form and just learning the technique. You don't really master this form and master this technique. The magic number has always been 10,000 throws. So think about that, 10,000 throws. If you have 100 days of practice in your season, actual throwing practice, don't count the weekends, don't count the days of your track meets, but 100 days, which is more than most people have, 100 days of throwing practice, and you take 30 throws a day, that's only 3,000 throws. So if you go 3 years, you're up to 9,000 throws. So you haven't even reached that 10,000 throw mark until you get to about your senior year of high school or your 4th year of doing the throwing events. Now, some people that practice during the summer who are good about it, some people that practice during the fall, people that do indoor track, yeah, you're going to make up that 10,000 throws a lot better, and you're going to have more experience. So maybe you can start with a heavier weight a little bit before somebody that just does one season, or maybe somebody that just throws javelin, or just does discus, because those aren't done during the indoor season. All right, so what you have to think of, guys, is, well, right, how do we get our athletes learning properly? Is there a way to teach them properly? And the way to teach them properly is by using an underweight implement. And we had this happen earlier this week, actually the past Sunday. I was out working with my athletes, and somebody was having some really tough troubles with a very beginner part of the throw, which is that release, getting that stretch reflex across their chest, pulling in their arm and releasing the shot afterwards. So we put a lighter shot put in his hand. And all of a sudden, his first couple throws weren't even going as far with the 4 kilo as he was throwing the 12. And then finally he realized that he should trust his form, trust his technique, and just focus on proper mechanics and proper release. And all of a sudden that 4 kilo started flying further and further and further. At the end of practice, we put the 12-pounder back in his hand, and he was able to still focus on the mechanics, focus on the technique, even with the heavier ball, and now the 12-pound ball was going further at the end of practice than the 12-pound ball was going at the beginning of practice. So it goes to show you that teaching proper mechanics and teaching proper techniques should be done with a lighter implement. We are, that I can think of, track and field, the throwing events, the only sport that does this. If you look at the Olympic lifts, if somebody was having trouble, say, snatching 60 kilos off the ground, their coach isn't going to say, well, you're having trouble snatching 60 kilos, so let's put 80 kilos on the bar and have you snatch that. It's going to make you so much better at snatching 60. Oh, you can't snatch 80 kilos? Well, let's put 120 kilos on the bar and see how you do with that. Let's just keep adding more and more weight, and that's going to teach you how to do it correctly. It doesn't work that way. Oh, you have trouble throwing a curveball, and you're a pitcher. You don't get the timing with your arm down or the placement of your fingers on the ball. Something's wrong. Something is not going correctly, and your curveball is all messed up, for example. Well, let's take a baseball that's twice as heavy as a regular baseball, and let's have you work with that. And that'll cure all your curveball issues. No, that's not how it works. That's not how we do things. But instead, in track and field, that's what we do. We say, okay, let's overload you with weight, and it's going to make it easier. When in reality, overloading with weight for younger, beginner athletes is only going to mess up their timing. It's going to mess up their release angle. They're going to put that lighter ball in their hand. They're going to be throwing it straight up in the air. The way we should teach, and if I had my way, the way that we should teach athletes is starting them off with a lighter shot put. So your high school freshman, say it's a freshman boy, he should be throwing a 12-pound shot. Well, what's wrong with starting him off with an 8-pound shot? Learning proper technique, learning proper mechanics, timing, and then gradually moving him up maybe halfway through the season to a 10-pound ball. Yeah, he'll still throw the 12 at meets and everything else, but he's a freshman. It's not like he's going to be throwing the thing 60 feet and you're going to have some freshman phenom on your hands. You know, teach them. Teach them by using the lighter implements. That's really the best way of doing it. So if I had my way in a perfect world, guys would start out in high school with an 8-pound shot, move up to a 10-pound shot, and by the end of their freshman season, by the end of their freshman track career, if you want to call it that, then they'll move up to the 12-pound shot. They'll stick with the 12-pound shot for the rest of the season. Sophomore year, maybe they start with the 10 just to kind of get those motor patterns going again, move up to a 12. Junior year, especially if they've been practicing all summer and all fall, start off with the 10 for a week or two, move up to a 12, and then at the end of the season start to implement something maybe a little bit heavier. So this is how we teach. We teach in increments. We don't just throw a bunch of heavy weight on somebody and say, hey, let's make it really, really hard, and then it's going to get easier when you don't have that weight in your hand. You know, if you have a sprinter that doesn't understand proper sprinting mechanics, you're not going to strap a parachute or a sled on their back or have them drag a tire behind them. That's not going to improve their sprinting mechanics. All that's going to do is just weigh them down, and it's going to just make them stronger using their poor mechanics. So we shouldn't do it with our throwers either. We should not do it with our younger shot put, discus, hammer, or javelin throwers. Don't put something heavier in their hands and expect it to fix or to correct or to make them a better thrower. Make them a better thrower first, and then when the proper mechanics and techniques are learned and the proper timing is learned, then gradually start to implement smaller, incremental, heavier weights. So don't go from a 12 to a 16. Go from a 12 maybe to a 6 kilo, maybe to a 14. Okay, for girls, don't go from a 4 kilo to a 5 kilo to a 6. Maybe go from a 4 kilo shot to a 5 kilo shot or to a 10-pound shot, which is right in between. So don't make huge jumps. Don't go from using a men's 16-pound shot to a 20-pound shot. Go from a 16 to an 18. Make the small incremental jumps. It's going to help them get stronger, and it's not going to, for the advanced guys and girls, it's not going to affect their form as drastically. For younger beginner athletes, which is who I'm getting a lot of these questions for, start with the lighter stuff, and you'll be better off for it because they'll learn proper mechanics first, and then you can gradually introduce them to the heavier stuff. Guys, these are some great questions we're getting, so keep them coming. Again, this is Coach Matt over at Primal Athlete Training Center, www.primalatc.com. If you have questions, the best way to get in touch with me is to either leave a comment underneath the YouTube video that you're watching right now, or shoot me an email over at matt@primalatc.com. Talk to you soon.